Hello, this is a video on how to play 31. Now, 31 is a game, um, and it's quite a simple card game, and so it's also quite different from any other card game you may have played before. And so, what you need for 31 is simple. You'll just need two or more players, a standard 52 card deck, and 3 objects per player. And these 3 objects count as 3 lives. And so in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players. I don't have a number, and these are my opponents. You can see the 3 dots. These are the 3 lives. Okay. And the objective of the game is to get the value of the cards in your hand closer to 31 than at least one other player. And so there is no winning around. It's basically every other player just tries not to lose the round, and there is one loser of each round. The player furthest from 31, so the objective is to get the cards in your hand, the value of the cards in your hand closest to 31 than any other player. The player farthest to 31, aka the player with the lowest value hand, loses a life. And so what are the value of the cards? Well, the value of the cards, ace is equal to 11, jack and queen and king are worth 10 in your hand, and then the cards 2 to 10 are worth face value. And so right now, the value of our hand is 11 right here with the ace, plus 7, that's 18. Card values can only be added together if the cards are in the same suit. So notice how I just said the value of my suit is 18. You might say, hey, why didn't we add this 7 here? Shouldn't the value of our suit be 25? But that's actually not the case. The value of our suit would be 7 because, would be 18 because this is a 7 of clubs. It's not in the same suit. You can only add up cards in your hand that are the same suit. A 3 of a kind in any card rank has a value of 30, and so if I had 3 7s here, so I just need one more 7 here actually, and I'll have a 3 of a kind. That's a value of 30, and so that's quite close to 31. That's quite a good hand. And so I think that's basically the main rules of the game, and honestly, you're going to see the rules as they go along. And so the player left of the dealer is the first to play, and they can choose the top card from the deck or the top card of the discard pile. In this case, we're playing a version in which there are 3 cards in the middle, and you can choose to swap from those 3 cards. And so you lay out 3 cards in the middle, and you get to swap all cards or 1 card, depending on how many cards you hope to swap. And so if I wanted to, I could swap these 3 cards with these 3 cards here. But I'm not going to. I'm going to try to swap 1 card here. And so play moves clockwise with players trying to improve the value of their hands. And you'll see what this says down here, and you'll see this all come into effect when we do a demo round here. You'll see what it says. It says knock. And so when a player is comfortable with the value of his or her hand, they can knock. And so knocking is basically ending the round. Knocking is saying, hey, I'm comfortable with the value of my hand. And so when you knock, you don't make any move. And then after the knock, every other player gets one more chance to make a move. After the last player has played, after the knock, all players show their cards. The player with the lowest hand value loses a life, and the winner of the game is the last player still with a life. And so you notice you have 3 lives here. Once you get to 0 lives, you still have another chance to play. But then if you are the lowest value hand, once again, you have no more lives, and then you are out of the game. So if a player has a hand value of 31, the round immediately ends. Every other player shows their card. the player with the lowest hand loses a life. And so there are a couple of rules here, but the game itself is very simple. And so you'll see these rules come into effect when we play the game. If the player that knocks ends up with the lowest hand value, they lose 2 lives. So if I think I'm confident, I'm like, hey, I have such a high hand value, I'm going to knock, and I end up with the lowest hand value, I actually lose 2 lives. And so it's riskier because you lose 2 lives. If the player that knocks and another player tie for the lowest hand value, the player that didn't knock loses 1 life because they had 1 turn after the player who knocked to improve their hand. So if one knocks and the value of their hand is 15, and then after every other player plays, 2 also has a value of their hand of 15. Well, so even though they have the same hand value, 1 knocked. So that means 2 had an extra turn to improve their hand value. And so since 2's hand value is still at 15, 2 would lose a life. So if two players have the same tied value, the player who did not knock loses a life. And so if you knock and 2 other players have the lowest hand value, they both didn't knock, so they both lose a life. And so that's pretty much the gist of the game. That was a lot of rules to digest, but you'll see them all play out in a relatively good manner here. And so I'm actually going to take this 10 of spades, and I'm going to swap it with this 7 of clubs there. And you can choose to pass if you don't want to play. And this player just took all 3 there. And so what's the value of our hand here? The value of our hand is ace, that's 11, plus 7, that's 18, plus 10, that's 28. That's quite close to 31, and so I'm going to knock. What does this mean? This means every other player gets 1 more move to try to improve the value of their hand, and now we all show the value of our hand here. So this is us, the in. The value of my hand was 28, right? Number 3, the value of his hand was 29. Number 1 was 30, number 2 was 30. Number 5 and number 4, the value of their hand was 27. Since they both had the lowest value hand and neither of them knocked, so if 2 players have the lowest value hand, the one who knocks gets to keep their life. In this case, none of them knocked, and so notice how we all have 3 tokens. Well, computer 4 and computer 5, they lost 1 life. So now we're going to start the next round. And so what happened there? You might say, well, that was quite quick. Computer 3 got a card value. You notice how this says blitz? That means computer 3's hand was 31. And like I said before, when the hand of one player is 31, the round instantly ends. And so unfortunately for computer 4, they had 10, the value of their hand was only 10, and they didn't even get to try to improve their hand. Lucky for us, we started off with a relatively high hand, and so we still have 3 lives, but computer 4 lost a life. And so if a player has 31, remember the round instantly ends. Now let's play with another live here. So they're passing. We have an ace, we have a 9 of diamonds. I'm actually going to swap the ace is quite high, and so I'm going to swap this with the, well, if we have a king, that's 10, right? Because kings are worth 10 points. This is going to be 19, that's, and plus 9, that's 19, plus 8, that's 27. I don't know if that's high enough to get me a win, and so I'm actually going to swap this with the king there. And hopefully there's another heart, and so once again, one player got to 31 in their hand. And so you can sort of see this game is quite simple. You just swap cards with the cards in the middle, trying to get to 31. When you think you have a high enough card value, you knock. Knocking ends the round, giving each player an additional turn. The player with the lowest value in their hand loses a life. If multiple players have the lowest value in their hand, they both lose lives, except for if the player with the lowest value in their, if 2 players have the lowest value in their hand, the player who knocked gets to keep their life while the other player loses their life. And if the player who knocked has the lowest value, since they ended up ending the round and they were so confident that they had a good hand, if they have the lowest value, they end up losing 2 lives. So you can sort of see how fast this game can go. Lucky for us, notice there's no difference. Even though Computer 4 ended the round, there's no difference between me and Computer 4. They don't get any bonus for having a higher value hand. You just have to not be the loser. If you're not the loser, it doesn't matter where you're placed. And so we're still in a relatively good spot. So this is our new hand. And so obviously, I forgot to talk about this, but after a round ends, you hand out 3 cards to each player, and you reshuffle, putting 3 new cards in the middle, and then you restart the round. So we have a 9 of 7. Um, honestly, this is quite a bad hand, so I'm just gonna pass here. I guess I'll just take the. Yeah, I'll just take the clubs there in case it is a high value, right? So I'm eyeing that queen there. And so we had the lowest hand once again. One player ended up having 31 in their hand, and so this is unfortunate in that one player is getting 31 so fast. And so we'll run another round here, but hopefully you're sort of just seeing what's happening here. We want to try to get to 31. The player who is farthest from 31 loses a life. The last player with lives remaining wins. And so look, we lost a life there. Player 5 only has 1 life. Player 4 has 1 life. Player 3 has 3 lives. Player 2 has 3 lives. Player 1 has 3 lives. In this case, we have an ace of clovers. I'm actually just going to take the... I'm just going to pass here. There's no real move that can be made. And I do want that jack of clovers. And so he did take the king of spades, so we're going to take the king of spades and replace it with the heart there. And so he knocked. What does that mean for us? That means we only have 1 more turn. So we only have 1 more turn. We know we can't do anything after this turn, right? We can only work with the 3 cards we have here. And so I'm going to take this queen and swap it with my ace. Reason being, this gives me 10, 20, 29. And so this gives me a better shot. And so look, I had 29. Computer 5 had 30.5. And that's a 3 of a kind. So if you have a 3 of a kind, that's worth 30.5 points in some versions. So in this version it's worth 30.5 points. And so notice we just barely survived, and so we still have our 2 lives here. And so hopefully you're sort of starting to see how to play. You just want to get as close to 31 as you can, so you don't lose a life. The last player with lives remaining wins the game. Obviously, if the player who knocked is the one who has the lowest hand value, they lose 2 lives. If 2 players both have the lowest hand value, the player who knocked survives. If 2 players both have the lowest hand value and neither of them knocked, they both lose a life. And that's pretty much it. So we have an ace of hearts. We can get a 3 of a kind here, and so I'm actually going to swap this with the 9. And that ended the current round. And I forgot to talk about this rule. Ace is worth 11. If you have 3 aces, that is a 3 of a kind, but it's not worth 30.5. That's 11 plus 11 plus 11. That's 33. That is greater than 31. And notice, remember what I said, if you have 31, you end the round instantly? Well, 33 is greater than 31. And so you also end the round instantly there. Every other player shows their cards. And so, sorry. Every other player shows their cards, but it doesn't matter. If you get 31, I forgot to talk about this rule. So the basic rules of 31, you want to be the player closest to 31 so you don't lose a life. I've already talked about how you can lose a life through all the knocks. If a player gets what's called a grand, I believe a grand blitz. That is 3 aces. If a player gets 3 aces, every other card is immediately shown, and every other player loses a life. Because this is such a powerful hand, every player lost a life here. Every single player lost a life. So if a player has 3 aces, the round instantly ends, but it's not like 31 where the round instantly ends and then you look at the player who has the lowest hand. It is the round instantly ends and every player loses a life. And so, in this case, since I did have the Ground Blitzer, I get to choose if I want to swap through my 3 cards at the start of the round. In this case, we'll keep them because we have a king and a heart. Actually, we'll just get new cards. And so that's the perk. But so notice how every player lost their life, and you might be saying, "Hey, number 4 and number 5, they have no lives left. Why are they still in the game?" They are still in the game because you are only removed from the game if you have the lowest hand and you have no lives remaining. A life is like a helmet. It's a protection, and if you don't have any, then you lose. But as long as you have some, you still stay in the game. So they used their last life, and so now they remain in the game. When I take this ace, although we can get a high diamond hand here, we can get a diamond hand of about 28, but I will risk it here, and take this ace. Hopefully nobody else knocks. And so lucky for us, computer 3 ended up having 31. But since we were not the lowest hand, we did not lose a life. And notice what I said about computer 4, they had no lives left. So if they lost one more time, they'd be out of the game. So computer 4 is out of the game. Now it's just us 3 left. Now if 5 loses, he will also be out of the game. And so I have a jack of clovers. I'm gonna go ahead and take this king of clovers. That way, if something bad happens, I at least have 20 points. I'm hoping to try to get a 3 of a kind. In this case, it doesn't look like it's gonna happen, so I'm just gonna take that 8. And that is a jack there. That is a jack. And so, oh, that was the jack I just put down. I believe we will pass here. And so, right, you pass. Every other player gets one turn until they knock. And so, computer 5 knocked. Once again, we had the second lowest. And so, we're getting lucky here. We did not have the lowest, and so we do not lose a life. We still have 2 tokens. And so, hopefully, you're just sort of starting to see how to play this game. It's quite a simple game. And so we do have 2 clovers here, but I'm actually going to go for the heart play here. I believe that's more beneficial for us. And so, oh, if I can get that queen. So I'm actually going to take this queen and get a 3 of a kind. And that's a very high value. And I'll pass here. Notice how we had 30.5 points. And so computer 3 actually lost a life there. And so you can sort of see how to play the game. It's quite easy. Notice how we have an ace of hearts and an ace of diamonds. I'm actually just going to go with a jack here. That's 31 right there. And so that ends the round right there, right? A blitz. And so right there, computer 2 loses a life. And so now there's just 4 players left here. If we can, I'm actually just going to take this heart here because it is greater than 7. If I can take that king, and he took it, so that's unfortunate. I'm going to take this jack here because I know that he has the king. I'm going to take this 10 here because it is greater value than the 9. And that is going to, well, computer 1 knocked, and so computer 3 lost their life. And so computer 3 and computer 5 both have 0 lives. And so let's continue playing. I'm actually going to keep these cards, might as well, because we do have an ace here, which is quite high value. And we can just do a 3 aces here, and that makes everybody lose a life. Remember, this is a grand blitz, and this is incredibly strong. If you have 3 aces, that's 33. That's greater than 31. And so everybody loses a life. So that's 3 aces. All 3 players lost a life. Unfortunately, computer 3 just got eliminated and they could not defend themselves. Computer 5 got eliminated as well. So now it's just me and computer 1. I'm actually going to take this 10 here, and I'll swap it with the clover. And we'll take that king. Oh, this is tough. This is tough. We'll take that king. We'll pass. Take that queen. And he knocked. What can we do to improve our hand? We can't do anything. So we pass. We only had 10 points there, and so computer one beat us. And so we're gonna keep this. This is a very high set. This is 10, and so I can't knock here, because I believe it is the first turn. And if everybody passes, the new cards do end up on the table. I have an ace, that's 11, a jack, that's 10, that's 21, and a spades, that's 9. And so I'm actually just gonna knock here. So I had 29 points, and so computer one lost their life, and so I have 1 life left. Computer one has 0, and so the game is about to wrap up here, and we'll do a final summary of the rules. I hope you guys are really actually understanding how to play this. We're gonna take this queen, and we're gonna swap it with a jack there. That gives us a somewhat better hand. Then we'll take this 8. We'll swap it with the king there. I'll pass. Everybody pass, so there's new cards on the table. And so we'll take this king, we'll swap it with the 8. We'll take this 10, we'll swap it with the 9. And he passed as well. I have a 10, a 10, a 10. I'm actually going to knock. And I won. The reason being, my hand was of a higher value. That was 30 points and that was 28. And so you want to strategically knock as well. Now, what is the final rundown of the rules? Final rundown is you need 2 or more players, a standard 52 card deck, 3 objects per player. In this case, we had 3 tokens to use as lives. You want to get the value of the cards in your hand closer to 31 than at least 1 other player in each round to prevent yourself from losing a life. Card values can only be added together if the cards are in the same suit. A 3 of a kind in any card rank has a value of 30.5. If you have 3 aces, it's called a ground blitz. It immediately ends the round. If you score a ground blitz, every player loses 1 life. If you score 31, the round immediately ends. That's a blitz. The player with the lowest hand loses 1 life. Aces have a value of 11. Jacks, queens, and kings have a value of 10. And all other cards have their face value when adding up the value of the hand. The player left of the dealer is the first to play. They can choose if they want to swap their 3 cards with 3 new cards from the remaining deck of cards that was placed at the side. I mean, the 3 cards in the middle, that were placed flipped up. Or they can choose to keep their deck. After 3 cards are dealt to each player, 3 cards are placed in the middle, flipped up. Once a player draws a card, they have to swap it with a card in their hand. If all players pass on the 3 cards in the middle, 3 new cards are drawn from the deck placed on the side. These 3 new cards are then placed in the middle, and play continues with players swapping their cards with the 3 cards in the middle. Note that you only swap the 3 cards in the middle if all players pass on the cards. Play moves clockwise with players trying to improve the value of their cards. When a player is comfortable with the value of their hand, he/she can knock. When knocking, a player does not draw a card. The knock takes the place of drawing a card. After a knock, every other player gets 1 turn to improve the value of their hand. They can either pass or draw a card. After the last player has played, the player before the knock player, all players show their cards. The player with the lowest hand value loses a life. The winner of the game is the last player with a life. In total, you have 3 lives, and then you get to play your last round with 0 lives. So you get to play 4, I guess. You get to have 4 rounds where you lose before you are out of the game. If a player has a hand value of 31, all the cards are immediately shown. If a player has a Grand Blitz, a value of 33, 3 aces, all the cards of every player are shown, and every player loses 1 life. If a player that knocks ends up with the lowest hand value, he/she loses 2 lives. Note that this rarely happens because if someone knocks, they are usually confident that they have a higher hand value than at least one other player in the game. If a player knocks and another player tie for the lowest hand value, the player that did not knock loses a life. The reason being they had a move to improve their hand and they did not get a higher value hand, so they are punished for it. If 2 players tie for the lowest hand value and both players did not knock, both players lose a life. After a player loses a third life, the player is still in the game. Once a player loses a life with no object left, with no tokens left, that player is out of the game. And note that we use tokens here, but you can use anything. You could use pencils as the lives. You could use erasers as the lives. It's up to you. Just 3 objects to use as the lives to keep track of lives. And honestly, this is quite a simple game. You want to get your hand as close to 31 as you can. The player with the lowest hand loses a life in that round. The round ends when either 31, 33, or a knock occur. And that's it, guys. Thank you for watching. This was How to Play 31. It's quite a fun game, and I hope you try it.